Really, I mean, I can tell you my own personal story. The first time that I went to vote, and I look like I do now, but my identity document still said Stephen. And when I went to not to register to vote, but to vote, and she said, "What's your name?" And I said Mott, and she said first name, and I said Stephen because it was still my legal first name. And she looked at me and she went, "You're not Stephen." And right there in the middle, everybody was standing there outing me as publicly as transgender. You know, right there in the middle of I had no idea who was in the room with me. I had no idea what she just opened me up to. And all of a sudden, in that moment, my life was in danger. That's what I'm talking about. That's what happens when people have mismatched documents.
And that was what year was that?
It was 2008.
Pedro, Stephanie, they're citing this 2002 case. I don't know how familiar you are with it, Pedro, but basically this estate case, they're saying this is the reason why they have to change it, because they've just kind of realized that there's this case out there. What do you think about that?
I think that's a ridiculous position. The case we're referring to is State v. Gardner, a case that we believe is in need of being changed. In that case, the Supreme Court determined that marriage was between a man and a woman, and that the gender as described at the time of birth controlled, and therefore, since Mrs. Gardner had been born with a penis, the Supreme Court at that time determined that she was not legally married to Dr. Gardner. Dr. Gardner, a physician, clearly understood issues regarding transgender concerns and married his wife, fully aware of what had occurred. So we don't think that case is an appropriate measure for the harm that the agency is doing to people like Stephanie.
Do you feel like this kind of came out of nowhere? This kind of
No, this didn't come out of nowhere. This came out of an administration that is completely and totally willing to harm innocent people. Keep in mind that bigotry wrapped in prayer is still bigotry, and the sanctimonious righteousness with which the administration speaks and their willingness to hurt people like Stephanie and our gay, lesbian, and transgender population in general should not be tolerated by a civilized society. It is time they stop making Kansas the laughingstock of our nation. We need to move forward in unity, recognizing everyone's equality, not just the ones they choose.
And in the past, people have been allowed to make these changes in the past in Kansas, haven't they?
Absolutely, with absolutely no harm to the state, none whatsoever.
Do you know how long they were able to do that? How many years?
I can't tell you the number of years, but the question that I would ask is, what is the state's inherent interest in denying this lady equality under the law? What do they see as being benefit to Kansas by treating Stephanie unequally? What's the benefit to Kansas and people in Kansas? None whatsoever.
Pedro, if the department goes ahead with these regulatory changes, do you anticipate filing a lawsuit? I mean, you mentioned the J. Noel Gardner case, and it strikes me the way for that to get undone is for the Supreme Court to undo it. You see litigation here?
Absolutely. If this is passed, there will be litigation challenging its constitutionality.
So, Stephanie, the person who makes this final change is Secretary Mosier. She's not here today. If you could speak to Secretary Mosier and Governor Brownback directly, what would you want to say to them?
I'd like to have them sit down with me and get to know me as a human being. And if they did that, I think they would see this thing entirely differently. They're making judgments about people that they don't even actually know anything about. And if they would just take and have, 15 minutes and sit down with me as a human being, they would see that a lot of these preconceptions that they have about what transgender people are like are entirely wrong.